Chapter 31. Gulo the Savage and his 29 vermin arrived at the broad stream too late. Tam and the hares had gone with the gorsim, sailing 2 hours or more downstream. The wolverine sat down upon the bank, wearied after his ordeal in the pines and the subsequent race to catch up with his foes. He knew his warriors were exhausted too. Gulo, however, would permit no signs of fatigue, neither his own nor those of his vermin. Watching the foxes and ermine flopping down, sorely in need of rest, the tyrant scorned them harshly. "Even as a babe I could fight all day and run beasts like you into the ground. Rest then, drink the waters and cool your paws, for 'twill be woe unto the beast who lags behind when we get going." He called Essay, an ermine tracker, to his side. "Our enemies do not travel without purpose, methinks. Whither would they be bound to on this water?" Essay shrugged. "Who knows, Lord?" He squeaked with pain as a wolverine's claw pierced the lobe of his ear. Gulo dragged him forward until they were face to face. His voice brooked no argument. "You are a tracker and a scout. Who would know better than you? Now use your brains before I spill them onto this bank. Fool, tell me, where are you bound?" With his face screwed to one side, Essay gasped out an explanation based on what he had learned of the territory so far. "Unless the watermouse of some secret hiding place downstream is likely to going off again, mighty one. If his water doesn't not go straight down to the Redstone Fortress, must pass by it someplace but a short march from the water. That's where they'll go, Lord." Gulo released him and sat pensively, licking the blood from his claw. "Well said. The Redwall place would be a wise refuge for my brother and his creatures." Essay was certain that Ascol was not with those they were tracking, but he was not prepared to doubt Gulo's supposition. Yeah, will be as you say, sir." Rakkety Tam stood watch at the stern of Logolog Torgi's big logboard, gazing back upstream. Skipper joined him. "No sign of him following yet, mate?" Tam eyed the point of the bend they'd just negotiated. "No, Skip, but you can rest assured they'll be on our trail soon enough. But we've got an advantage. We're afloat on a pretty fast current, and they don't have boats. That's the way to travel, eh?" The otter chieftain nodded. "Aye, Tam, so it is. Those vermin will have the paws run off of themselves, trying to follow the bankside. We could do with sailing a bit slower if you want to keep 'em on our tails." A shout from Torgi in the bow interrupted them. "Oh there, backwater goes him, 3 ahead." Tam grinned wryly. "Well, that'll slow us down if anything else does. Let's go and see this tree." The other gorsim craft had pulled into the bank shallows. Aboard the big board, shrews backwatered energetically with their long paddles, fighting the swift current. A massive old willow had collapsed across the stream, blocking it entirely. Heeling about until it was broadside on, the big logboard slowed down, coming to rest against the willow trunk with a gentle bump amidships. The gorsim chieftain turned to Skipper and Tam, sighing irately. "This is a nice wee mess we run into. Have to see what can be done." A young shrew called out from the shallows. "Looks like we'll have to portage the boats, Chief." Logolog Torgi eyed him sceptically. "What did you say? 10 tribes of badgers couldn't lift this craft of mine to carry it over that old monster." Lancejack Wildery leaned against the protruding willow trunk. "Well, what the dickens do you suggest, sir?" Togi laughed humorously. "I dunno, sir. You got any bright ideas yourself?" Corporal Butty Whopscott emerged from under the awning where he'd been assisting the gorsim cooks. "Blaming great log, ain't it, chaps? Can't go under it or belly well over it, what?" Togi glared at him. "Is that all the help you can offer, matey?" Whopscott dusted flour from his paws, grinning from ear to ear. "Oh, sorry, sir. Were you looking for suggestions? Well, how's about the old fulcrum and lever, what?" The one called Five Shrew clapped the hare's back soundly. "Aye, that's it. Fulcrum and lever. You can shift anything that way." Shrews like nothing better than a good argument, and the gorsim crew were no exception. One shrewmate after another exchanged comments vociferously. "Fulcrum and lever, rubbish. There's no moving that thing." "You asked you. Give me a fulcrum and lever and I'll move it." "You and whose army? You never find a lever long enough to shift that trunk. Don't talk twaddle." "Why, big gob, I'll twaddle you if you comes over here. I'll tell you how to do it." "Oh, yeah, will you? Go on then, clever clogs. Seezy, use 2 of the smaller log boards, one for a fulcrum, the other for a lever. Ain't that right, H. Shrew?"
Oh, aye, but while you're leaving one end, you have to have the other end moving too. Move the other end? Why's that? Don't you know nothing, thick-tail? So's a log will lie straight in the water and get washed downstream out of our way. That's why.
Soon every beast was shouting, with clenched paws raised and snouts butted together truculently. Log-a-log-Togy broke up the argument, bellowing,
Rifto, get your boat over here, that be the fulcrum. Stream bub, your craft'll do as a lever. You's both your crews to do it. The rest of you, start shoving wood paddles against the root end of that trunk. Come on, Gossam, get an old heavy-ho going.
The shrews leapt into action as Log-a-log murmured to Tam.
See that? That's the best way to solve a problem, Gossam fashion, but democratic and sensible to beat.
Skipper stifled a chuckle, whispering to the borderer.
You look so democratic and sensible there for a moment. Like it's all going to knock one another out flat.
As the shrews went about the business of moving the fallen tree, Tam took Skipper and the hares back up the bank to watch out for signs of Gulo and his vermin pursuing them. As they moved cautiously along, using the trees close to the water as cover, Tam shook his ears in vexation. Listen to those rubies stinging their heads off. The vermin are sure to hear them if they're in the area. Skipper took a more philosophical view.
Well, it ain't as if old Gulo doesn't know what we're up to this way, mate. The Gwosim are only singing to help the job get done.
Corporal Butty wrinkled his nose.
Hey, say, catch a little tune, ain't it, what?
Tam set his jaw, trying to ignore the heaving song.
Shove and push, heave and ho, bend your backs each mother's son. Lean down ho, one and all, 'tis the only way to get the job done. Shove and push, heave and ho, do your best is all I ask. Lean down ho, one and all, get your paws into this task. Shove and push, heave and ho, Gossam, don't you slack about. Lean down ho, one and all, bring her round and drag her out.
Since young Essay had the best sight and sharpest ears of all the vermin, Gulo had dispatched him to scout ahead. The wolverine was still weary, but reluctant to give up and rest. In high bad temper, he followed up the rear of his command as a threat to any who would dare to stop or drop out. After a long and arduous march along the stream bank, squelching through mud and sliding over wet rocks, Essay came hurrying back to report, "Lord, I had singing ahead." Gulo called his band to a halt. One look from him warned them to be silent. He strode several paces ahead of where the rest stood, bringing Essay along with him.
"Singing? Where? I hear no singing."
Essay could hear it, but he knew better than to contradict the wolverine. Cupping a paw around one ear, Gulo continued his interrogation.
"No, I cannot hear it. What is the singing about?"
All the ermine could do was explain and suffer the consequences. "Mighty one, I could not hear the words, but my ears are keen. I heard the sound of singing." His answer did little to improve Gulo's mood. The wolverine's paws shot out, buffeting Essay so heavily about both his ears that the force knocked him down. Gulo stood over him, snarling.
"Now each of thy ears are ringing aloud. Idiot, wasting time here. Get up and fetch the others."
Moving the willow trunk by fulcrum and lever was not as easy as the shrews had figured. The mere size of the huge ancient tree was a daunting sight. Long, thick limbs, branches, boughs, twigs and foliage covered the fallen giant's crown. A mass of twisted and tangled roots, some half as thick as the actual trunk, formed the base, protruding in all directions above and below the waters of the broad stream. The Gwosim laid one of their logboats sideways at the top of the trunk. The second, lifted clear of the water, was placed across the middle of the first craft amidships, forming a type of seesaw. At the rooted end of the willow, shrews crowded in the shallows, some ready to push, while others attached ropes at either side, ready to pull. The principle of the scheme was to move the tree until it floated in the water parallel to both banks, enabling the entire thing to drift off downstream, opening up the navigable waterway. But theory and practice were strange bedfellows to the argumentative Gwosim. Log-a-log-Togy stood on the centre of the mighty trunk, roaring orders, whilst his shrews squabbled and disputed furiously.
"Take the strain on those ropes, Gwosim. Right, now dip forward the ball. Top of the boat down, underneath the tree. Puddin' it, I said the forward and not the stern." "Aye, Chief, we're pulling these ropes. We might as well drag the tree over on top of us." "No, you won't, O'Tell. You'll just pull and we'll push."
"That's easy for you to say, Numblegut. You're over on the safe side." Togy did a dance of rage.
"Shut up, all of you! Ready, now all at once. Push! Shove!"
Within moments, a crossfire of shrew comments began anew.
"The bottom boat's sinking!" "Well, get out of it, Mother Brain. You're not supposed to be in it." "Oh, help! I'm singing in the air. I'm getting onto the stern of this boat here." Togi ran up and down the trunk like a mad beast. "You bottle-nosed beetle-brains! Land them upon the stern! Take the strain on those ropes! Get off your buttons and push that root end! Move! Push! Pull! More of you down the stern! Get your weight onto it! Heave!"
Gulo and Essay crept forward with the rest of the vermin behind them. The distant squabbling and roaring of orders reached Gulo's ears. Just as he halted, preparing to speak, one of the white foxes whispered to him, "Lord, there's the foot beast yonder, see?" Gulo drew back behind an elm as he glimpsed the lanky figure of a hare dead ahead, no more than half a stone's throw. He spotted more hares, a squirrel and an otter coming slowly along the stream bank. Gesturing in a semicircular movement toward the woodlands, the wolverine gave murmured orders. "Skildsy, go round the back of them and cut them off from the water mice and their pots. Follow me quietly if you want fresh meat." Drawing their weapons, the ermine and foxes stole off to the left, following Gulo in a long arc. Skipper shouldered his lance. Turning away from the upstream bank, he addressed Tam. "No sign of vermin, mate. Must be limping along after their scrap with those blackbirds." Tam put up his sword. "Aye, let's back to the coasting. Perhaps we can land them a pole to shift that tree." As the company turned, an arrow whipped out, catching Skipper through the side. Corporal Wapscott, who'd been bringing up the rear, yelled, "Amber! It's a vermin!" 2 hares went down, felled by arrows and a spear. Then Gulo dashed out at the head of his vermin, roaring, "Gulo! Gulo! Kill! Kill! Kill!" Completely taken by surprise, Tam called to the patrol hares, "Into the water! Get downstream!" Arrows, axes and spears pelted at them. Tam grabbed Skipper, hauling him into the water and thrusting him out into the current. "Get back to the coasting, quick!" Rushing back ashore, he drew the sword of Martin. After striking down a fox that was about to spear Lancejack Wildery, Tam hurled himself at the advancing vermin, still yelling for the hares to get in the stream where they would stand a chance of being saved by the swift current. 5 hares were down, but the rest broke free, retreating into the broad stream. Corporal Butty Wapscott was harassed to the front and left by vermin. Tam had to run no more than a few paces in the direction of his beleaguered comrade before he stopped in his tracks by Gulo the Savage, who suddenly bounded out at him. The border warrior slashed out blindly with his sword. Gulo screeched as the blade lopped off his right ear. Blood was flowing freely from the wound as the wolverine clapped a paw to it. Tam ran by him, finally reaching the besieged Butty, who was gallantly holding off the main charge with his long rapier. Together the 2 warriors fought, side by side, their backs to the stream, stifling the advancement of the vermin. Though vastly outnumbered, Tam and Butty, each with his blade slashing like a windmill in the gale, fought so furiously that their foe could not overcome them. Gulo was screaming in the background, urging his vermin on. Ashen-faced and tight-jawed, Butty muttered to Tam as they battled on, "Into the water, friend. Save yourself." Tam's blade thrust at a leering face. "Not as long as you're there. We're going together." The hare caught Tam's eye as he repelled an axe swing. "We'll be slain in the shallows. There's too many of the scum. I order you. Go now, sirrah." Tam feinted a spear thrust. "Not without you, Corporal." Butty almost doubled up, but recovered himself. "Gulo got me in the back with the fangs and claws. You must go before he gets you. Go, Tam. I'm already a dead beast." The border warrior chanced a quick glimpse over his friend's shoulder. He gasped in horror at the long, ripping wounds, Butty's blood now mingling with the water in the shallows. "Meat, come with me. We'll make it together." Butty shook his head resolutely. "No, sir. My string's run out. I've only got moments. Go whilst I have the strength to carry your bags, friend. If you get a chance another day, then slay Gulo for me, what?" Without waiting for an answer, the hare charged straight at the press of vermin, roaring out his last war cry. Tam turned and dived into the current. He was caught in the downstream swirl and whipped away. Water filled his mouth and nostrils as he vowed silently to fulfil the task the hare had put on him. Fortunately, Rakkety Tam was out of sight before his friend was slain. He had not died easily. Pierced by a forest of weaponry, the gallant hare broke his rapier blade in 2 and flung it at the enemy. He had no time for another war cry, because his teeth were set in the throat of a screaming ermine. Thus died Corporal Butty Wapscott of the Long Patrol, a fighter to the bitter end. Togi and his shrews finally moved the fallen tree, but not as planned. Several gorsin were lost, crushed beneath the heavy-rooted base as it shifted back on them. The tree did not move free in one go. First the top half budged under the pressure of fulcrum and leverage, but the base end remained put. Then, aided by the current, the willow swept side on over the water in a single mighty rush. Instead of landing midstream, the tree had positioned against the far bank, rolling backwards through the shallows and killing the shrews who had been pushing at the rooted end.
The haulers had been forced to wade for their lives without benefit of the ropes, which had been swept under water but now lay tangled beneath the trunk. The waterway, however, had been cleared. Under Toogy's frantic orders, the crew righted the longboats and brought them back onto the bank. Before they even had time to recover the bodies of their dead comrades, Skipper came wallowing downstream, gasping, "Lend us a paw, mates, and make ready to sail." Once the otter had been pulled out of the water by the long gorse and rowing poles, it was clear that somehow he had been injured. Loggerlog Toogy inquired as he slapped bank mud on the wound on the other chieftain's side. "What happened, Skip?" The otter spat out a jet of water. "Ambushed by vermin. No time for chit-chat, mate. Here come the others. Put her out and get her under way. You best put a move on, Toogy. Gulo and the vermin on our tails." Groups of long patrol hares were hauled from the racing current onto the logboats. The blood-curdling yells of Gulo's band could be heard drawing closer as the hares were pulled aboard, and the small flotilla of logboats shot out into midstream. Skipper grabbed a shrew. "It's Tam! Say, there he is! Pass him an oar, quick!" Exhausted, the warrior squirrel was just trying to keep his head above the surface as he was rushed downstream. Behind him, vermin were running along the bank, shooting arrows at him. Tam had never let go of Martin's sword since the start of the ambush. He saw the thick ash paddle splash into the stream ahead of him. With his last ounce of strength, he swung the blade, bedding it in the paddle and hanging on tight to the sword with both paws. The Gorsin crew heaved him aboard just in time. The banks had become rocky, rising higher, funneling the already fast water into a roaring, boiling tunnel. Gulo's archers vanished from view as the boat swept away on the wild torrent. Every beast threw themselves flat to the decks of the logboats, which were well out of control as they hurtled through a chain of rapids. High, white-crested masses of water shot by madly as the logboats bumped against one another and scraped over protruding rocks. The returning archers found Gulo the Savage sitting on the fallen willow at the bankside, slapping pawfuls of bank mud on his severed ear stump to stem the bleeding. Essay pointed with his bow. "Mighty one, they escaped downstream. The flow is too fast and the bank's high with rock. We cannot keep up with the speed of their craft load." Gulo was off the trunk with a bound and onto the bank. "My brother asked on the walking stone. Did you sight them?" Essay wisely backed out of range. "No, sire." Gulo, his eyes gleaming madly, seemed to ignore the scout. "Hiding in the boats, that's what they'll be. But never fear, I'll get them. You there, and you, all of you. We have our own craft. Use your spears, roll this tree into the water. We will travel as fast as they do. I will have them before they reach the Redwood Place. Cut those ropes and make haste." Essay wanted to tell Gulo about the rapids, but he held his silence. There was no talking to the wolverine in his present mood. Within moments, the huge willow trunk was crashing downstream, with the vermin clinging to it for their lives. Oblivious to the blood that streamed from his wounded ear, Gulo stood upright, filled with exhilaration at his first taste of riding rough waters. An insane light shone in his glittering eyes. He kicked at the nearest vermin, shouting at them above the thundering current. "Paddle! Use thy spears and paddle! Fast! Faster!"